Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, bowl season is coming up in a little over a week, and the first bowl game is the Bahamas Bowl between the UAB Blazers and the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. Who do I think is going to win this game? Let's break it down. Now, UAB is 6-6 and 4-4 in Conference USA this season, and they've had a pretty decent season, but they've had a lot of turmoil at head coach because before the season started, their longtime head coach Bill Clark retired, and then they had their interim coach and offensive coordinator Bryant Vincent, and he did a decent job taking them to this 6-6 record. But now Trent Dilfer is going to be their new head coach, and I think that's a pretty good hire. Obviously, we don't know how good he's going to do, but he has a lot of experience coaching, so I think he's going to do a good job. But UAB still had a pretty decent season, and at least they made a bowl game. And in week 1, they beat Alabama A&M 59-0. That was a good win. Then they lost at Liberty 21-14. That was a tough loss because Liberty's had a pretty good season this year. Then they beat Georgia Southern 35-21. Then they lost at Rice 28-24. They broke the cardinal rule, never lose to food, as Josh Pate always says. Then they beat Middle Tennessee State 41-14. Then they beat Charlotte 34-20. Then they lost at Western Kentucky 20-17. That's not a bad loss. Western Kentucky's still a really good Conference USA team. Then they lost at Florida Atlantic 24-17. That was a tough loss. But then they lost to UTSA 44-38, and that was actually a really good performance, even though they lost in double overtime because UTSA is a really good team this year. Then they beat North Texas 41-21. That was a good win because North Texas was in the conference title game with UTSA. Then they lost at LSU 41-10, and then they won at Louisiana Tech 37-27. So all those results kind of show that UAB is a pretty solid team, even though they're 6-6. They played pretty well against a lot of really solid teams in their conference. And quarterback Dylan Hopkins, he split time with quarterback Jacob Zeno, so he has not been the quarterback all season. But over the season, his stats are 120 of 191 for 1,709 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and 109 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Dylan Hopkins is a solid quarterback. He's not an explosive passer. He's not going to get tons of deep balls down the field, but he is a decent quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over that much, and he does exactly what UAB needs him to do. But UAB's run game is fantastic. Running back Dwayne McBride throughout the seasons had 233 rushing attempts, 1,713 rushing yards, 19 rushing touchdowns, and 2 receptions for 10 yards. So he doesn't get a lot of catches out of the backfield, but he's a beast of a tailback for UAB. Very solid, tons of yards, and he definitely has a chance to be in the NFL. And running back Jermaine Brown Jr. had 142 attempts this year for 832 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and he had 17 receptions for 114 yards. So he's more capable of catching the ball out of the backfield. But UAB has 2 very solid running backs, 1 star and a great complimentary back, and it's going to be very tough for Miami, Ohio to stop both their running backs. And wide receiver Trey Shropshire, 35 receptions for 740 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's the leading receiver for UAB. A very solid wide receiver, but UAB's passing game is just not as good as the running game. But they're decent in the passing game. But UAB's rushing attack is fantastic. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Noah Wilder had 100 tackles total this season and 54 solo tackles, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. Linebacker Tyler Taylor has 72 total tackles, 29 solo tackles, and an interception. And safety Jalen Key at 59 total tackles, 40 solo tackles, and 3 interceptions. And UAB's defense has been pretty solid. It's not a horrible defense. It's not a fantastic defense, but it's pretty solid all around. But I would give the edge to UAB's offense. Their offense is a little bit better than their defense. Now, on the Miami, Ohio side, they are 6-6 and 4-4 in the MAC this season. And Chuck Martin, at head coach, has done a decent job at Miami, Ohio. They've made tons of bowl games, but they've been pretty much a 6-6 to 7-5 team. It's not a good or bad thing. At least they're getting to bowl games, but Miami, Ohio hasn't really improved under him, but at least they were able to make another bowl game. And Miami, Ohio's had a pretty decent season because, like UAB, at least they were able to make a bowl game. And they lost at Kentucky 37-13 in week 1. That was a tough loss because, again, you're playing an SEC team. That's tough to win. Then they beat Robert Morris 31-14. That was a good win. Then they lost to Cincinnati at home 38-17. Again, not a terrible loss, but you would have liked to maybe been a bit more competitive. But then they beat Northwestern 17-14 on the road. That was a good win, even though Northwestern had a terrible season. Then they lost at Buffalo 24-20. That was a tough loss. Then they beat Kent State 27-24. That was a good win. Then they lost at Bowling Green 17-13. And then they lost to Western Michigan 16-10. Both very tough losses there. Then they won at Akron 27-9, good win there. Then they lost to Ohio at home 37-21, and Ohio ended up being in the MAC title game, so that was a tough loss. They weren't too competitive there. Then they won at Northern Illinois 29-23. That was a good win. And then they beat Ball State 18-17 at home to achieve bowl eligibility. And even though Miami, Ohio did struggle against a lot of lower tier MAC teams, Miami, Ohio did at the end of the day get to 6 wins, and that's all that matters. So they had still a decent season. And quarterback Avian Smith has split time with Brett Gabbert, just like UAB's had 2 quarterbacks playing this season. But Avian Smith has a rushing attack that Blaine Gabbert does not have, and I think that's why Avian Smith has played more. He's 93 of 190 for 1,137 yards and 9 touchdowns and 5 interceptions this season. So again, not too bad, not throwing a lot of picks, not a lot of touchdowns as well. But on the ground, he has 503 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns, and that's really helped Miami, Ohio on offense this year because they have really struggled to pass the ball. But him being able to run the ball really helps out Miami, Ohio's offense. And Miami, Ohio has decent running backs as well. Running back Kean Mosey has 106 attempts for 455 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has not played in a couple weeks, I think, due to injury. I don't know if he'll be able to play in this bowl game or not, but they also have 2 other talented running backs. Running back Tyree Shelton has 77 attempts for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns, and running back Kevin Davis has 51 attempts for 276 yards and a touchdown as well. So Miami, Ohio has 3 running backs, at least 2 we know are going to play, but at least 3 running backs that are all solid. And wide receiver Mac Hippenhammer, 52 receptions for 726 yards and 8 touchdowns, and wide receiver Miles Marshall, the Indiana transfer, had 23 receptions for 377 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miami, Ohio has a decent receiving core. They just do struggle to pass because Miami, Ohio doesn't really have the quarterbacks to get the job done, but they do have a decent receiving core. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Ryan McWood at 121 total tackles, 50 solo tackles, and an interception and a forced fumble, and defensive back Matthew Solopek at 109 total tackles, 51 solo tackles, and 3 sacks for Miami, Ohio this season. And Miami, Ohio's defense is pretty solid. I would say that their defense is better than their offense because Miami, Ohio's offense has really struggled this season, but their defense has helped them win a lot of games this year. So who do I think is going to win the Bahamas Bowl? UAB is a better offensive team than Miami, Ohio. Miami, Ohio really struggles on offense. They can run the ball pretty well, but passing the ball is really a struggle for Miami, Ohio. And Miami, Ohio's defense has been solid this season, but UAB's defense is about the same. They're both solid. And the key here is that if UAB's offense plays better than Miami, Ohio's offense, and both defenses play about the same, then UAB has the advantage because their offense is better than any side of the ball for both teams. It is the outlier. It is the advantage. And because of the fact that both these teams are glad to be here, unlike in bigger bowls who we'll get to down the line, both these teams are going to have all their players playing. There's not going to be opt-outs like you're going to have in these bigger bowls. Both these teams want to be here. And Trent Dilfer being the new head coach, maybe that can create some intrigue where he can come in and maybe rejuvenate UAB to play even better than they already have. Or they could play a little bit worse because of the fact they're trying to get used to a new coach. That's a little bit of an interesting angle there as well. I think Miami, Ohio's been a very solid team this season, but their offense is just, to me, not good enough to be able to win this game. Obviously, I think they can win this game, but I think UAB is going to beat Miami, Ohio 28-21 in the Bahamas Bowl. This game could go either way. Miami, Ohio, and UAB, they're both 6-6, so it's not like either team's elite, but I just think UAB has been more solid against the teams they've played in Conference USA than Miami, Ohio has done in the MAC. Even almost beating UTSA, and they were able to beat North Texas because UAB's offense has been really solid. UAB has a good defense, and so does Miami, Ohio, but if UAB's offense shows up to play, they are the better team because, again, Miami, Ohio will not be able to keep up if UAB's going to score a lot of points, and I think UAB will show up to play, and they're going to score a decent amount of points in this game, and I think Miami, Ohio is going to keep it close, but I think UAB is going to beat Miami, Ohio 28-21 in the Bahamas Bowl. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think UAB or Miami, Ohio is going to win the Bahamas Bowl and why, and I will see you next time.